I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Today, I'm talking to filmmaker and actor Tom Konkle. I first became aware of Tom as a filmmaker when I saw his noir film Trouble Is My Business last year. I expected a solid interview out of him, but what I got, in addition to a solid interview, was one of the most astute explanations I've ever heard of how a director can create a safe space for actors. In addition to the acting stuff, we get pretty heavy into some of the technical aspects of filmmaking and screenwriting as well. Let's do the interview thing.
I've been watching you for a couple of years, so this is a treat.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, I started it. I mean, like honestly, just because I felt there wasn't a lot of information about like the business side of low budget filmmaking. So I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll really try that. And at first, honestly, I was just trying to drive views to some of my work.
right.
But
Which is
I
smart. If you,
yeah.
it's a give take. If you give information, then people appreciate it. They may check out your work. It's a lot better than just broadcasting one direction. Watch my stuff. Watch my stuff. Watch my stuff, which rarely works at our level anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to enroll people in it and you want to educate them. That's why I liked your channel. Is that I felt like your information was scaled to the level. What I didn't like is
Mhm.
I one time I went to the AFM and they had a forum for indie filmmakers, and the panel was the publicist for Wes Anderson, the head of filming Miramax, and
Uh-huh.
the publicity department from Paramount, and half of the forum
Mm.
was, it was so difficult to move. We had a $2 million launch party, and it was on top of this one building, and they changed it, and we had to move it to another building, and so the entire forum was about something that not one single person in that room, like the budget for that after party was the budget of everyone's movie. And that was the indie film forum at the AFM. And so that's why your show's great, is that your show's like, look, here's how to put it up on Amazon. Here's how to sort of soft market it. And that's what I've been doing my whole life. Like, I'm the product. As an actor, I'm the product.
Mm-hmm.
But also, not everyone has to love what I do. Just enough people have to love what I do. And
Yeah.
and that's a huge paradigm shift where you're like, no, everyone doesn't need to love it. I don't need to spend millions of dollars for everybody to love this. I just need to find my people and do something that they want to see. That if they want to see a particular thing, then I'd rather have 50 loyal people than broadcast out to 100,000 that are like, whatever. Don't really care about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we don't have to reach a mass audience, and we don't like we might have the dream to be
Of
a Quentin
course.
Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or whoever it is,
Right.
but 99.9% of filmmakers don't get to that level,
That's right.
but
In the
you can,
meantime,
yeah,
yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
realistically work at these smaller levels, make a little bit of money, make a living, maybe make a good living, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be all that.
That's right. You're still a filmmaker. You're still doing it. I don't call it selling out. I call it buying in. If somebody's like, "Oh, you sell out and do a studio," it's like, no, you're buying in. If you happen to make it, it's great. That fantastic. But buy in. Invest in yourself and keep making the movies that you want to see. Like the worst feeling. I straddle two worlds because I'm lucky that in my day job or my real job or whatever is doing other people's stuff.
Hmm.
I'm an actor that executes other people's stories, or I'll be a second unit director that does someone else's big dream. And I was always surprised how often on the set, not one single person believed in what they were doing. It was,
Mm.
it's a check. It's a, hey, I got a thriller on my resume, or I got my comedy thing taken care of on my headshot. And I was like, that's my passion. Like, I've spent 20 years learning the craft of comedy. And to them, it's like, I don't have enough comedy on, and it's a very different feeling to speak to creators that are really passionate about it. Those are usually the top tier, excellent people, showrunners that really love the genre. If they love horror or they love science fiction, it comes through in the work. But the people that are ticking off boxes, it's remarkable, particularly on the executive side. It's
Mm.
widgets. And so if you can find a balance with the level that we're doing it, you could make stuff that maybe you even want to see. and if someone agrees with you, then, oh, okay, I get to move on and do another one. If no one agrees with you, maybe you should get out of the business, and I feel like that's my barometer. It's like, well, would I like this? Like, I kind of like some of my stuff, and I like the stuff that I'm making for someone else, but I get to enjoy it through their eyes. There's no, this feeling of the first time you sit down with other people, you've lived with something for like 3 years, and you get to watch it with them, and it feels like you're it for the first time, because you're checking their reaction, like, oh, they did laugh there, and oh, this and this and that does work, and actually this is better than I thought it was with the music. That's the rush. It's like golf, that one hole in one keeps you through the next 400 shots that you miss. That feeling, that adrenaline rush when you show it to somebody, is what keeps all of us going, I think.
Tom, what's interesting about you is I became aware of you solely as a director. Now, you were in the movie, but, like, I came to know you as a filmmaker. And, honestly, as I was prepping to do this interview, I'm looking over your IMDb and looking up projects, and I was actually blown away by how much you've acted. I mean, it was like something like 87 credits on there. And I'm sure that's not all of them, but going all the way.
It isn't.
You started in like late 80s?
Late 80s, yeah. I graduated from college in 88. And I think I mean, on actual official IMDb, there's a ton of other things, but I think there's 88, 89 credits. I've been lucky. I've been able to be on some great shows. I did a comedy special with John Cleese. I've acted with Nick Nolte on Luck. I got to be in Baskets with Zach Galifianakis, which was fun.
I love that show.
Oh God, yeah. And I've shadowed great people. One of the reasons I think I'm a decent director is I did a show called Back to You, and James Burrows was the director on it. So I kind of shadowed James Burrows and learned the dance that he does, because he does old school 3-camera style shooting. So the actor in me is wanting to please that part. And I people that know me, they're like, I didn't know you were like playing this insane British guy, or you're doing this or that. I become very different characters. But another part of my brain is recording. How do they talk to the actors? Where are they placing the camera? Like, I would watch Michael Mann on Luck, and he shoots with like 6 cameras at once, 7. You don't even know where to throw your energy as far as an actor, because he might be shooting you this way, he might be looking at you this way, but that's his magic, of like catching people off guard in real moments is a cool technique. And then others, there's one camera, there's only one way the story could be told. All of your energy is focused to this one thing. And I look, in doing commercials, I've done about 150 commercials. The commercials aren't on IMDb. I'd say I did at least 150 of them. And some of them are huge directors. Like the director of My Left Foot directed me. And again, he was such an actor's director that literally we spent a day together talking about, I mean, this is a 30-second spot, but talking about Christmas, talking about doing this thing. He wanted this kind of It's a Wonderful Life feel to it. And I could tell why he extracted these beautiful performances from people, because a director is presiding over a series of sort of happy accidents and knows when to pull those accidents out. And I think a good director, as an actor, I can always feel when a good director has created an environment where I can bring to the table what I wanted to bring. And then without telling me I'm wrong, they can redirect what I came as a preconceived notion of, like, well, I think that, I played this hippie character in Noise in the Middle. And a good friend of mine, Marcus, had directed me in this thing called Raisin Brahms, where I played Brahms and I crashed through a wall and I do all these things. So we're crazy together. So I came with this character, and he was kind of like the dude, from Big Lebowski, but he owns a Psychic Eye bookstore. And he let me play with this within a horror movie. I gave it little grace notes of like, hey, here's your book. You want your BOGO? Like, buy one, get one, kind of thing. And he left all those little grace notes in because he was a good director. And he realized Tom is not subverting the story. What he's doing is adding a levity that the rest of the movie will be so freaking heavy that if we don't like these people, if we don't have a break, we'll get numb.
Right.
We'll be numb to what happens. And a director who allows that to happen but still has their vision, I think that they get the best performances out of people. Because if you feel constricted, or you're like, the first thing you'll appreciate this. First thing an actor ever does at the end of a take is you do something. The first thing they do is and look and try and find the director or find somebody like, what did you think? Like, give me something. Yeah. And some directors, you look over at them and they're going, and they're doing this and, looking at other things. They're just like, that's good. Or I have the sandwich. I'm good. Okay. Yeah, you're covered. And then they move on. And as a good actor, you threw down for them, but you have no idea that you were part of this mechanism. You hopefully did your job. But that extra level for me that's satisfying is a director who's present and goes, wow, I loved that. And can we do a little bit of this or this or that? Or I noticed you were doing something in your eye. Like, I call it think loudly. When you're an actor, if you think loudly, I can do nothing. And you sitting there will impose the meaning that you need, or you'll be able to look at it and you're like, oh, Tom's upset right now. And I'm not going, I'm so upset right now. It's just something that I do that if I'm thinking it, you look into my eyes and you're like, I feel it. I empathize it. And I think every great movie we've ever seen, you walk out of the movie theater and you feel like you are that character, or you lived that character for a minute. And that was the beauty of a gazillion things. You know how it is. It's like a gazillion decisions of what hat to wear. Did we bring lunch? Am I using the right lens? All coalescing into a moment of walking out of the theater going, yeah, I feel like Indiana Jones right now. Right. And to me, that's the close-up magic of making movies. Is I'm striving for that every time, of having it seem like, well, he didn't do anything. He just made this film noir. He didn't do anything. I don't want them to feel me working at it, and it is so much work. And I have nowhere near perfected it, but I strive every time I do it to make it seem like there's as few barriers between what the crazy thing is that was in my head and what ends up in your head. Try and eliminate some of those sort of walls of silence between it that you have to hop over, where it's like, okay, does it look good? Is the story clear? Is the audio good? All these things get in the way of the story. And I think at our level, we have to be very aware of it. It's very easy now to get decent equipment, but what we choose to do with it, that's what's the difference between good and bad. You have great mic pointed in the wrong direction. You can have incredible lenses, and you've got vignetting, or you see the matte box, or it's not in focus, or all this. It's like you choose to think it's going to make what is good now, not whether you had decent equipment.
Yeah. Or all of that is good. It is in focus. It looks friggin' beautiful, but the shot you've selected, the dialogue you've chosen, it doesn't tell your story, or it doesn't tell
exactly.
It well. Yeah.
Well said.
So a lot, I hear the phrase a lot. A lot of people hear this phrase, directors talking about creating a comfortable environment.
Yes.
And it's almost like this catchphrase. And I've been on so many indie productions where I'll hear a director saying that, but they don't do it. They're just saying it,
They're just saying it.
So like when you're directing a project, like specifically, how do you create a comfortable environment for the actors, or a creative environment?
It's a terrific question. I think from the get-go, it is taking a genuine interest in the people that you've chosen to play the characters, rather than leave them in a trailer or send them a script, see on the day, and nothing of their style. Sometimes it's very interesting to say to an actor, hey, how do you like to be directed? You'll see their expression go, no one's asked me. No one's ever asked me that. And the answers will be as varied as a human can be, because some people will say, well, I like to have my first take and then you correct me. And other one's like, hey, I would love to talk about it, but then on the day, let me do my thing. Others will be like, well, tell you what, let's try 3 different ways and you tell me what you like. And often that disarming question of like, I want to know how you want to be directed needs to also be coupled with this, something that seems counterintuitive, creating a safe environment. You need to feel decisive yourself. They need to feel like you have a vision, that you have their back. A comfortable environment is not soft pillows and making sure they have M&Ms. A comfortable environment is this. A comfortable environment is, I know at 2 a.m. that my actor is not going to be throwing down their best performance, and I'm shooting their butt on the reverse on some other actor, and they're throwing down the best stuff they've ever done, and I'm not going to get it. And so a comfortable environment, I can see it in people's faces where I go, you know what, on the first shot, I'm not going to do this because I want to warm you up. Let's do a 2 on you fairly early in the day. Let's warm you up with that. You know, they'll see like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel good. And I'm a little wobbly on a couple lines. And then I'll go, hey, before it gets too late, let's go ahead and go in tight. You're doing so great. Let's go in and do the tight and do all the little close-up work that we need to do. And then once we have that covered, I'll get the other shots that I need. Well, my God, that's the comfortable environment, because they're like, I'm throwing down and he's actually filming it. Because so many times, and I can tell you as a guest star on TV shows, so many times you arrive at 7 a.m. and around 10 o'clock that night, they finally go, okay, you in the car with the dog. Okay, you're going. The camera's mounted in the back seat. I'm throwing down the lines. You know, you're getting the back of my head and doing that. They're like, okay, great. You know, and that's not a comfortable environment, even though they were nice to me all day. At the end of the day, I felt like I was just a cog. It wasn't important, that there was a very good chance I would be cut out. You know, that for an actor to feel comfortable, by the third day, you should have a relationship where respect is given, but also they feel like you're in charge of the ship. You know, an actor does not feel comfortable showing up where they feel like they have to direct the film, or even more so, that the director does not have a command of the language in the film or what the characters would do, but rather is just discovering it, you know, in that moment. It's like, well, do you do that? Oh, okay. I didn't know. Okay. So you sit down and eat, you know, and there certainly are directors who do that. And they're like, didn't you think about this? This is your script, you know? And so I think that level of comfort is knowing you have their back. Certainly making them feel physically comfortable, particularly with everything that's going on. If it's a love scene, something like that, you just, you know, make them feel like they can be the best they can be as their character, and not be outside their body. What are people thinking? But just in the moment. And the last level, I'd say, of comfort is it should feel to them like they're part of the dream. Like during the enrollment and telling the story, they want to contribute to it. They're like, hey, I saw what you did with that other thing. Is there a way I could pull the gun like this and do it and shoot? Now you know that they're into it. And they feel comfortable saying something, because someone has a great idea. It reflects well on the director if it ends up in the film. But if they're like, Jesus, they just yelled at that guy for like looking sideways at him, I'm not going to give them the gun idea. Well, now your film has suffered. Yeah, you look like you were like a big boss man on set. You know, it's like, I yelled at everybody. I fire somebody every day. There's actually directors who do that. They're like, I fired someone today, just, you know. And at the end of the day, that means no one is going to step up and go, I don't know if you noticed, but the button was undone, and you did what? It was undone. You're fired. You know, so it's much better to create an environment like, Tom, I know you're like totally into your thing, but I think I set this down with my right hand instead of my left. Can we try it again? And they're not going to get yelled at, you know, because they're going to shut up and not say anything and not feel comfortable. If you're just a complete tyrant, they're going to go like, you know what? You'll find out in the edit bay that this doesn't match. You know, so what? You know, so that's the very long answer to your question, because I think comfort is so many things to so many people on a set, including the crew.
Yeah. You know, that's great. It's a question that I understand myself, but I don't think I've ever heard it articulated quite as well as you just did. I had a feeling from the first part of the interview. I was like, I'm going to ask him this one. It's kind of a hacky question, but I like. I was like,
yeah,
he's going to give a good answer. That's great. So, did you started out as an actor? So did you have ambition to direct early on, or is this something that developed?
Well, this is funny. This is upside down. I started wanting to be a filmmaker when I was a kid, about 10 years old. I saw Star Wars and all that, you know, and I'm driving home from Star Wars, and I told my parents, I'm leaving and I'm putting you in the home, you know, because I can't take care. I'm an only child. And my mom's like, well, I guess we'll be in airports. And, you know, I ruined a ping pong table with baking soda and doing the opening scene of Hoth. I painted that thing white, and I put baking soda, and I did a stop motion flyover with the whole thing. I loved making movies, and I executed them as an actor out of necessity. Often I was an only child. So much like Peter Sellers, I would create different characters myself and record them into a tape machine, or I'd film myself with my friends. So it became very effortless to be part of it because I knew I would show up. But I never I never entertained the idea of acting as a profession because it's so difficult. It's so the chances of making it as a working actor or getting in are so just out there. It's not even a business plan.
Right.
So it's ironic. I moved out here to be a filmmaker. I moved out here as a director and ended up as an actor instead of an actor wanting to be a director. I came out here, worked in the production side. I worked at a company called ITC, which, used to do the Thunderbirds and all this kind of stuff, and made some films. But then I started doing live performance again, which I had done in college, kind of as a drama major type thing, and loved it. So I was on the stage probably 3 times a week doing shows. I was at the Santa Monica Playhouse doing all these kind of things. And one time I was doing a pilot for a sketch show, and I stood up, and without thinking, I went down and I was showing the cast. It was a 3-camera show, and I was on the set at Empire Studios in Burbank, actually. And I started performing each one of the parts. And all of the producers of the show are watching it, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm like, and then you come in and you say this, and I changed my voice, and I did this, and I hit all the things. And this guy, Mark, was like, have you ever thought about, acting in this? Like, you're better than the cast in it. And I thought, no, well, so I was editing with somebody who was a casting director. And just on a lark, I had cut together some of my live performances. I had done Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. I had done Beyond the Fringe, the Peter Cook, Dudley Moore comedy, all those things. And I'd cut like a demo of it just so I had the memories. I show it to her, and she goes, do you have an agent? And I'm like, no. And she's like, you should be acting. You should be doing this. So I got an agent, and I booked a national network commercial within a month or two of having and put aside my filmmaking for a while because it was I loved acting. I loved disappearing into acting. At that time, commercials actually freed you up during the day to do theatrical auditions, to really hone your craft. You could take classes. This was pre-internet. So you'd book a couple national networks, and you were free to really work. As an actor, your job is driving. and you're the candy is that day that you get to shoot. But your job is going, okay, I've got 3 in Santa Monica. I've got to go here, here, and here, and here, and practice your craft and keep your the instrument that you're using in shape. And I'll tell you, when you have booked something and you're in a flow and you're doing a show, people on the other side, when you're casting, you can tell when that actor's engaged and they're doing it and they're working because there's an energy around it. So ironically, the more I worked, the more I could walk in and just like booked this, because I was like, oh wait, I just did a character like that like 3 weeks ago. There was a time I was doing a show with a guy who's one of my comedy partners named Dave, and we've worked together almost 20 years now. But at the time, we were shooting a commercial in Santa Monica, and he and I had a 2-man show going at the Santa Monica Playhouse at the exact same time. Well, the casting director didn't know we were a comedy duo or a performing duo, but we ended up booking the spot together. And so in the middle of this spot, it was with this other one, it was an Israeli actress and us in a restaurant. And the director kind of comes over going, I think I've discovered a new comedy team. I think I put together some chemistry. And both of us, it's sort of sounding like we were joking. It's like, yeah, we got a live show, a comedy duo show at the Santa Monica Playhouse. He's like, right. And we're like, no, seriously. We've been doing for the last 6 months a comedy show together. And he's like, oh my God, I thought you guys had great chemistry that I just, and that was what was beautiful about it, is because we could look at each other and it's like, oh, he needs another second to do his reaction. And then he knows my bag of tricks and we do it. We booked that thing independent of each other. They put the 2 of us together. And that, I think, is why in a lot of movies, you'll see the chemistry of an actor or an actress or them together, because there is that sort of level of professional, comfortable, but also knowing each other's bag of tricks that they love to work together. They're going to, it's the Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan thing where it's like, I throw all my energy into your eyes. You throw it to me. You make me look great. Acting is tennis. It's getting the ball to the other person and they hit it back even better, making you look spectacular. And that is acting. Acting's made the other person look good.
When was it and where was it then that you started transitioning back into making your own films?
Yeah, it was an interesting break. I was starting to become very dissatisfied with live performing in particular, because people would be like, hey, do you have it on tape? I didn't get to it. I didn't see it, because it's a film and TV town. And I didn't want to be on the road. We did comedy festivals. We would go to Austin or I'd take a show to Chicago or New York or do the things, but people just missed it that I really wanted to have see it. And as great as a medium, live theater is an actor's medium, but I am a visual storyteller. I love film. And I started to identify more with the directors and producers and writers than I did with the actors, because I started thinking, well, these actors they can do anything they want to do. They don't really care. Whereas I will read an interview with this director and I'm like, that's me. Like I want to pick the lenses. I want to do that. So I started filming shorts using all the actors that I knew, from performing with them. And I really enjoyed getting back to it. And then I started a company at the time. It was called Mythic Image. And then it sort of evolved into Pithy Productions, which was when, internet was sort of in its nascent stage. And it was a way in one day, more people saw something that I shot internet than saw me perform live in 10 years, and that's when I knew it's the same amount of energy. It's the same amount of, prep to make something good. You rehearse it and do all this. But the fact that in one day more people saw it than if I had done an entire run of a show, I went, okay, my energy is just, I can't spend 6 months, putting up the show I really want to see and have, only a few hundred people see it.
Right.
So the filmmaker in me came back very quickly. I've always been writing shows, writing things. So it was really easy to transition back to writing screenplays. I ended up selling a couple things that I wrote. I've been a staff writer on a show. I was a staff writer with this brilliant writer, John Colton-Berry. He had worked on Phineas and Ferb, and I was the staff writer on this thing called Be Cool Scooby-Doo. So we got to write these Monty Python versions of Scooby-Doo. So it started very gradually that, I was behind the camera more than I was in front of it. And also I'm getting older. And so I evolved as a character and as a person, as an actor, but I also started to go, there's more I want to do. Like I don't want to be a waiter. I want to own the restaurant, and there's a big difference between being a waiter and making other people super rich, and owning the restaurant and at least going, right or wrong, at least this was my thing, at least I put this up. And, it's like doing any show. It's like, sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes you fail and you learn the most, but at least it was sort of the way I wanted it, instead of a series of, compromises on something that I didn't even really create in the first place. Yeah. And so by the mid 2000s, I was back to full filmmaking, had a production, company doing things here in LA. And then that naturally evolved into doing a feature. And because I partnered with this guy, Mike Smith, who is my producing partner, and he's a technical guy who also loves storytelling, is very creative. VFX started being more of a possibility because of him. So my vision expanded to incorporate that. And I wouldn't have been able to make something like Trouble Is My Business had I not gotten the skill to know how to shoot it for effects and know how those effects would integrate it. But also it opened my mind to what was possible, because you think to yourself, as a filmmaker on our level, you can't rent the Biltmore Hotel for, $5,000 a day. So I built it digitally. Into the Biltmore and I steal some shots, and you build it out with photogrammetry and 3D CGI, and you know what? It may not be perfect, but you're suddenly in the Biltmore. Yeah. And so that was the big step, was giving myself permission to do that. And now that I've made a feature, the conversation is more, what do you want to do next, instead of, well, I mean, you're an actor and you've made some shorts, but can you really make a feature? Because once you wrap your head around a feature, it's more doable, but also they're like, oh, he can execute it. Like, you can sustain a story for 90 minutes. And It's the difference between writing a short story and a novel. Once you've written that novel, a novel seems less daunting.
Awesome. I was going to say, that was one of the things about Trouble Is My Business that really impressed me, was just the scale of it. It didn't feel like a little tiny movie. I mean, you could see the seams here and there, but but for the most part, because every time You know, I look at a new indie movie, you know, and by indie movie, you know, I mean these, sub $100,000, sub $50,000 movies. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I almost feel bad admitting this, but my first, knee jerk reaction before I see it, I'm like, it's not going to be good. You know, which
Right.
which which I shouldn't, but it's just like
Right. But
so many.
experience is a
Yeah,
cruel
yeah.
teacher. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
everybody, I mean, every filmmaker I've ran into making low budget movies said, "Well, when I make a $20,000 movie, it's going to look like a million." And everybody says it.
It
It's a
rarely looks like a million.
yeah,
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 it rarely
yeah,
does.
rarely does. But
Uh,
yeah, the look of that was really impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, see, that means a lot to me because I use the aesthetic of the studios, which in the 40s and 50s, they didn't have a lot of money to
Hmm.
do film noir as a genre. It was considered a B movie. And when I started looking at what I wanted to do as a feature, I thought, what's scalable? Because you can't really compete where it's like, and then the helicopters come over the ridge. And then, it's like, yes, I have all those ideas. I'd love to do that, but let's get real,
Hmm.
and the reality is the biggest you've given me is that you're like, that didn't feel small. I didn't notice, I'm pushing the seams of that thing. I see the seams. I'm pushing it as far as I can. It's a cast of 31 people.
Hmm.
It's a period piece. It has 2,000 visual effects. Every single shot has a visual effect. So if you don't
Hmm.
notice a shot with a visual effect, I'm like, huzzah, that one worked. The other ones you'll notice the effect because it's like, well, that can't possibly exist.
Right.
But my point was, film noir didn't have $1 million to build big sets and build things, so they used light and darkness to create a mood that tonally was reflected in the story. So I said to myself, okay, if I'm going to make a feature, I'd love to do a science fiction. I'd love to do an adventure or anything. But what's doable at this moment is, what if back then they had digital cameras, and this is what I have. The aesthetic I love of film noir, where it's visually very rich and lush, but it tells the story, but it has the luxury. In America, we can afford to be that cynical,
Hmm.
and so it's such a great comment on human beings and human nature that I feel it's timeless. Yes, this happened to take place in the 40s and 50s, but we've all had that girl that was bad for us, and all your friends say, don't be with her. You're going to run into a wall. Don't be with this guy. Don't be with this girl. And boom, you hit that wall. That's
Hmm.
film noir. And so it just makes it more dreamlike to set it in the past. It makes it seem a little more distant and mythological, but it's still about human beings that are using each other, that someone who wants to be redeemed. It's about how information is more important than things. That was a huge theme in the movie, in that you can have this giant diamond. It's like, you can't even buy a sandwich with that diamond, because what do? You go in the diner and go, I'd like to buy a ham sandwich. Here's the Hope Diamond.
Right.
But the information that flows, that the police have on people, or the information that someone holds about their family and secrets, that's power over people. That's power over your destiny. And back then, information traveled much slower. There was no DNA evidence. So if you wake up, and this is not a spoiler, but if you wake up and, I don't know, there's blood all over next to you, you can't DNA it. It could be your blood, it could be someone else's blood. You have no idea whose blood that is, because there was no forensic science around it. So you can have a mystery back then that information doesn't travel fast. You're looking for a person, you got to physically show their picture on a piece of paper to people going, have you seen this guy? You seen this guy? And I thought, with my modern mind, how do I create an interesting sort of murder scenario that only could happen in retrospect? I'm like, well, if you don't have a body and you don't have information to go on, I mean, did a murder really happen? And then I started thinking about that. So I worked backwards from the plot, device of, like, how would someone get away with something? And in her case, if you don't have a body and you put it to one place where, you wouldn't think to look for that body, do you really have a murder? And then information doesn't travel, and then you don't know whose blood it is. And I thought, okay, those all work in the 40s. And then on top of that, a 40s aesthetic is perfect, because I don't have to build huge sets. I don't have to light all this stuff. I can just use the light I have to be very stylized. And of course, I had Ridley Scott in my head, Jacques Tourneur in my head. I'm like, I want shadow and light. I want things playing. You probably noticed in Trouble, I have mirrors that I'm spinning, and those mirrors will make a sweep of light right on an important line. It'll sweep over somebody's face.
That's great.
And you should know the relationship between the characters with the sound off. If you turn a movie off and you can still tell who has power, like if you look at Trouble, who's standing over who's equal, who's over top of someone, and who finally closes that gap. That's the power struggle between every single character. And as a filmmaker, I staged it within the scene that often, unlike modern movies where you're cut, this person's talking, cut to this person, cut to this thing, cut to this. If you look at a classic film, even like The Godfather, someone stepping forward and saying something in the scene, then turning around and walking away gives them emphasis because it's staged mise en scène. It's inside that scene. So all of that was bubbling in my head with Trouble. And then to top it off, we had the tech to pull off some of the VFX. Music was super important. So I was like, it has to be an evocative sort of Bernard Herrmann, Jerry Goldsmith score, because I'm a complete nerd for soundtracks. I listen to them when I'm writing or when I'm performing, I can hear it in my head. So Trouble was just a time capsule distillation of where I was in that moment and what can I do with what resources I have. And I didn't want to do a two guys sitting on the couch talking about zombies type movie. I wanted to do a film noir that at least tried, to have a femme fatale and a scope and build a world with you go to a 40s diner and you go to these different locations and you have the exotic cars and all that kind of stuff. And I think the people that caught my dream just did beautifully. They knew exactly what I wanted. It's amazing when you set your mind to it, the universe works in your direction. The minute I made my mind up to do it, a commercial came on for a museum that let you drive old cars and let the people that came. So we called the museum. Listen, this is a Hail Mary here. I noticed you let people drive the old cars. And it turns out this guy, Earl, who owned it, was like, yeah, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm making a 40s movie. I love 40s movie. And I go, yeah, I wondered if I could come down and just like use all the cars. And he's like, sure, come on down, drive around, use them, whatever you want. So we went down there and he stayed up until 3 a.m. waiting to lock the place up because he loved watching us do it. He came to the premiere of the movie and he was like, I didn't think this would be this good.
Was this in Los Angeles?
Yes. Yeah. It's the Automobile Driving Museum.
That just goes to show you right there. You never hit the shots you don't take. And a lot of independent filmmakers say, oh, I need this kind of location, but I'm never going to get it in LA because everybody's so jaded. Nobody wants to help out.
Yeah. No, you never know. His son, you have to try. His son did visual effects. And so when I explained to him what he wanted to do, he's like, well, it's like I'm spending time with my son, and he stayed up till 3 a.m. He must have been 70. And we made him feel like, important. We took a genuine interest in him. If you're real, if you're genuine and you take a genuine interest in, what he was doing, I went there and I met with him and he explained the architecture that he does. He draws and does these things and everything. And I took a genuine interest in the cars. He felt like he was enrolled in it, which is important, as you were saying, like filmmakers who say, oh, I can't get it and everything. The reason you can't get it is you didn't enroll them. You just said, I want this and you should give it to me.
Exactly.
That's not enrollment. Yeah.
The one thing that I really try to hammer in on this channel, one of the things is, like everything is not about you as a filmmaker. Like if you want to succeed, you have to make it about us.
Us. Yeah.
It's a back and forth. It's a conversation. You're having a conversation with the audience. You're not just, hey, adore me.
Look at me, broadcast out and adore me. Yeah, because there's very little to adore, and that's the thing is, I think the minute he realized that I genuinely was grateful, gratitude was huge because I really was, and I let him know. But I took a little bit of time to look at the museum that he had built. I looked at why he did all these things. And by the end of it, he was so enrolled that he's like, listen, if you need to come back. And so I went back 3 times to get everything we wanted. And he's like, hey, I picked out a really good one. This is a 1947 Plymouth. This is exactly what Roland Drake would be driving. And he gave it to me all free. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
And see, I am genuinely grateful. I brought him to the thing to thank him. I would have done anything to help him. And I think that's a huge lesson for people at our level, which is not only enroll the people in it, but make everyone know that you're they don't owe you anything. You're thankful that if
Yeah.
somebody, if someone gives you a house to shoot in, send them some food, do something. Don't act like it's like, well, you're going to be in a movie, I'm going to make you a star.
Right, right. Like
It's it's not going to happen.
you see so many independent filmmakers and producers, especially, that they act entitled. That
Yes,
like they're entitled to your help. They're doing. I can't tell you how many
they're doing
movies
you a favor.
I've worked on for little to no pay. And the
Yeah.
producers are there, like they're giving you this huge opportunity. To work
Yeah,
on this
yeah, curing
$10,000
cancer.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I call it the curing cancer thing, where it's just like at a certain point you just want to go, you do realize this is a movie about alligators, right? And you just want to go, of course I want to make the best movie about alligators possible, but you are not able to dangle that carrot of, well, if you do this one, the next one's going to be triple.
Ballpark, what was the budget on Trouble?
I think all in, because as you know, delivery, I had to get E&O insurance. I did do a mix with Trip Brock at Monkeyland.
I know Trip well, actually. My roommate, my old roommate, gosh, we haven't lived together now for over 10 years, but I used to live in downtown Burbank with Steve Avila, who worked at Monkeyland for.
I know, Steve's a friend of mine.
Steve's awesome guy.
He's great.
Yeah,
he would always greet me at Monkeyland. He'd be like, Tom. Yes, Trip moved out here from Virginia. We're from the same place. We've been friends for 27 years. We've known each other almost, I guess, 28 years. I just talked to him last week.
No wonder the sound was good. That was another thing I was going to mention earlier, but it just slipped my mind. I was like, it had a really slick sound design. I was like,
yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I did was I'm meticulous. It seems like I'm just like creating goofy stuff and doing all this, but actually I sent him 25 pages of copious notes, all referenced on I want a grandfather clock in the distance ticking, because that will increase the level of tension in this scene. We need to pan from left to right on this particular thing. I would tell him what environment I want outside the window, all these things meticulously, because it's a psychological war you're waging with sound. You're waging war in the film on people's minds. And the minute you have sound in there, it changes everything. And effects change everything. Music. When I put music on that end montage, Mike and I were editing this thing. We literally got goosebumps like up here, because not only were the cuts hitting on the music, and we had not planned on that, but because the cuts were musical and had a beat, they started hitting. But we were like, oh my God, it's going to end exactly at the right point. It was the first time we'd laid the piece of music down, and it ended having not heard the music with it. And by the end of it, we were like, that was it. I said, I knew she was trouble, but then trouble was my business. And the last violin went down. And then the credit music came up, and we both went, and that's how you know you're in flow. And Trip had a great feel for that mix. It's a 5.1 mix, and I needed to feel, with the punches, I needed a little bit of that subwoofer. With the dialogue, I needed to make sure that it was center focused and that it was very clear. Because there's a lot of people talking. It's a very talky kind of film because it's a film noir. So when you got that scene with the table, I was juggling 5 tracks of audio, each person mic'd, plus a boom on somebody else. And so you had to feel all of that real time in the mix. And so he hit all those beats. So sound gives away a budget faster than anything.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's funny too. You mentioned the editing, editing musically, and that's something that when I'm editing narrative features, on my initial, I do the layout, just a straight layout. But when I do my first actual pass of the movie, I turn dialogue off and I start to edit my cuts to a piece of music. And it usually will be like a classical piece, and it doesn't necessarily have to match the movie tonally at all. I'm just using it for a flow, and people look at me like I'm crazy, but
no.
I'm like no, because editing, it is music. It's not just like cut when this person talks or that person talks. It's like it's got to move. I heard a commentary by I forget. I think it might have been the Coen brothers talking about Miller's Crossing, and they were talking about how they edited the Miller's Crossing, the shootout scene between Albert Finney and
Right.
henchman, and they were talking about how they edited it to some classical piece of music, and I was like, oh, and so I started doing that. I co-opted it, and it's a great technique.
Oh, it is a great technique because there are several scores, there's several timelines in it. One is the music timeline, one is the editing timeline, and one is the story or script timeline. The script has a musical flow to it, or a flow of some kind, and a rhythm. Then the visuals have that rhythm, and then the music does. And the best films bring all those into harmony. They don't all have to be playing the same note, but they all have to have harmonies underneath each other. You have to earn pauses. You have to have all those little moments. A really great film, and it costs nothing to have a good idea, by the way.
Totally.
You can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't get me wrong. Sometimes, I do that and I'll cut, music, but I'll adjust those cuts when I get fine cut, or whatever. But it lays your base,
It does. It lays that base in, and it gives it a flow. And like the best movies, you shouldn't go, if only they had a budget. It's like, no, if it's a bracing scene and you remember how you felt and how the people's faces were and how that story made you feel, that doesn't cost anything. That is just technique and inspiration, and it costs nothing to have a good idea. It's how you execute that idea. And if you have a flow to it, that's that little magic. People are like, well, why is this good? And the other thing just feels clunky. Why is this one independent film feel like a huge miss, and this other one just feels magical, even though they didn't really have much more than the other guy? Why is this so much better? And I think you touched on it. It's that invisible flow to it that it seems surprising but inevitable. You're like, of course you cut there, and of course, I'm not watching the cuts. I'm watching two people have a conversation now, and of course I would look at how the other person's face is reacting to the word that guy said, because if I was really there, I'd be doing that, and looking at the two people talking. And a good editor knows that. They know psychologically. It's like, I can tell when I've held on somebody too long or not enough, because I think to myself, well, how does the other person feel about what they're saying? And if I need to do that in a movie, I know they've missed a cut, because somebody will say something and it'll drop, and you'll see them in a 2 and it'll be the back of the other actor. And I'm like, well, surely you're going to see. He just said his child was missing. Surely you're going to see it. And they don't cover it, or they don't go to it. And I'm like, well, how does the other guy feel about that? He could be happy the kid is gone. He could be heartbroken the kid is gone. You've taken part of the language out. In the script, it could say, and he was distraught. Well, how do we know that unless you show us that? Or he was capable of doing anything. How do you film that? Right. And I think that's editing too, is editing's knowing psychologically what the audience needs to see. Minimally. It's leaving out everything that's boring. Right. It's minimally telling people this is exactly what you need to see to tell the story and nothing more. It's so much more important to know what to take out than what to put in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things too, I do usually after I finish my first rough cut, when I'm starting to fine tune, is like I'll go through, because I usually overcut on a rough cut, because I put everything in, and then I almost mathematically, I'm like, okay, this scene has 18 cuts. I want to take that down to 10. Or I want to take that down to 5. I have kind of I like holding a little longer. I like things to breathe a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
I think we're in an overcutty renaissance right now.
I agree. I think just because you can cut, I sound like with Malcolm in Jurassic Park. Just because we can do this thing doesn't mean we should, because in the old days when you had to actually cut the negative, you had to be super sure you're going to cut. And I feel like you're not confident with your material if you're cutting too much, because there's a reason why there's no other cuts of Spielberg movies. He has shot what he wants you to see. You got a oneer. Sometimes they'll shoot a oneer, and it's like there is no other way to look at that scene. And I ask myself all the time, is that the one way? Yeah,
because there's so many, like these days too. You talked a little bit about it earlier. It's the mise en scène, and keeping things like in a shot, and thinking about the boat, the shuttle boat in Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yes.
taking them across, and it's just that one shot. But
Yes.
the boat's moving, so the camera's moving. There's movement, but the most impressive thing about that scene, though, is the way Spielberg blocks it.
Yes.
Like it starts out like in a close up on the guy, but then he
Yes.
moves back, and it's like this
He moves
wide shot.
back.
But the
Yeah.
camera is stationary. The only movement is with the boat. But
Yes.
it's
brilliant. Because
and
not only that, he shows the geography of entire town silently, and you're behind them. You get the entire layout. You're like, oh, there's the beach side. There's how far we are from the buildings. This is what it's like to be this far out. And then he'll have someone like come into a tight close up talking like that, then step back, and then he's talking. I call it two faces east. You've got two faces facing east, talking to each other in this way. Like, yeah, what do you think about this? Well, I think we should do this. And yes, it feels completely unnatural when you're doing it, but on film, you're like, I get to see both their faces. I get to see their relationship. And Spielberg is a master of the oneer. And I think many directors need to learn that it isn't just about setting a light, having person A come in. I'm going to say all my lines this way, and then the same lighting setup, I'm going to say all my lines this way, and then we'll just film the whole thing as a master and then move on. It's like, no, is there a way to do it in one shot that gets everything covered but keeps the eye busy? Because the ear is much deeper than the eye. The ear is why we can listen to a 10-hour audio book and be enthralled, but the eye needs stimulation. The eye needs, after 30 seconds, your eye's like, okay, got it. So you have to find a balance of, you can have long shots, but show me the relationships of the characters. Show me something happening in the background or an environment. Like Kurosawa, he will drench something in rain and have that rain outside a window, and he'll have a conversation inside this little dojo or something. And it's gripping because you feel the environment, you feel the relationship between all of them. And he's done it mise en scène. Someone will step in and change the power structure. You'll have two people on one side, one person on the other, and then the alliance will shift to the other person. And I watched that so carefully because I have a stage background. I know that how you use that space dictates how people feel about the characters and how they feel about the story. That proscenium is just transferred to the film. The film should not just be cut. It's like a fight scene. A fight scene where you don't feel the geography does not feel like a real dangerous fight. It just feels like you're cutting around something, or you're whirling a camera in a bag, hoping to hide the fact that nobody knows what they're doing, versus one where you feel the geography, you feel the place, you feel like the chair, that chair's there, or there's a knife over there and he's going to reach for it, or he's going to do that. And the geography of whatever environment they're fighting in. But again, Spielberg as an example, The Flying Wing, where they have the fight between him and Indiana Jones. You feel the geography of it. That wheel is turning, that the blades are coming up. He gives you shots where you just know exactly where you are. It's not just fists flying with a propeller behind them. You actually are like, oh my God, duck, the thing's turning around, and then the gasoline is coming towards you. That you need to understand that visual language of film to really master it. And you should just practice it all the time. It's like, how do I tell the story with great economy, but great style? And when I was doing Trouble Is My Business, honestly, that was in my head every day. I was like, what is the one? I used a split diopter often. A split diopter is where you put something on the lens that allows the very close foreground to be in focus and the distant part all in one shot. And the reason I did it was not because, hey, I want a cool shot where there's a thing. No, what I wanted is I wanted a dead body with a woman's face still like lifeless, close to the lens, so that you felt very uncomfortable because it was someone's mother. And then you see how the two characters react to it, because one of them is responsible for that death.
Right.
And so when she's there looking at her in the split diopter shot, well, I could cut up to her and then cut back to the dead face or whatever. But if you're forced to stare at that dead face the entire time, the person's lying going, I have no idea what happened here. Is she okay? Kind of thing. And you're looking at this face, it's much more visceral. And it's using technology like a diopter, something very simple optically, to make you feel how you would if you were really there. Versus in reality, you wouldn't go, oh, let's look at the face. Oh, let's look at this person. Let's cut to this person. It would feel disjointed.
I was going to talk a little bit more about the business side of things. Maybe we can do another one in the future. But
sure.
I kind of want to wrap up a little bit. So what's next for you?
A couple things. Having learned everything I did, doing something like Trouble Is My Business and Noise in the Middle as an actor, I've grown. I feel like the next things for me is something that's still on the same scale as far as budget or ambition, but also sort of moving the goalposts a little bit. I want to do a slate of films. I'm looking for financing for 3 films right now. I've created some alliances with Vernon Wells. He has a lot of friends in Australia, great actors. So I have this thing called Island in the Stars that I want to do that's a little bit more ambitious with Australian actors in it. I have a movie called Savage that I want to do, which is kind of a John Carpenter, people in a very contained space, kind of tearing each other apart. It's the dynamic of a dysfunctional family tearing themselves apart on a spaceship.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I have this noir kung fu sci-fi thing called The Last Days of Nikki Pompey, where a woman has to solve her own murder in her mind in the 9 minutes that her brain is dying. After you're shot, you have about 9 minutes here. And so literally her life flashing before her eyes is actually the scene of the crime.
Kind of like an occurrence at All Creek Bridge, but a mystery. I don't know if you're
a mystery like occurrence.
The short story.
I love that.
Yeah.
One of the first shorts I ever saw in school was Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and it stayed with me. And certainly, yes, that would be a great pitch. It's a sci-fi mystery Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
If anybody knows what that is anymore, but
I don't care. Yeah, I will make them care if they don't know. But yeah, I think it's a great those idea. Films and a few others. Yeah, and there's a horror comedy that I want to do called Meth Gator, which is ripped from the headlines. These real gators have been fed meth and gone crazy. And
I like that.
This guy Xander and David wrote this incredible script and asked me to do it. Yeah, so I have a bunch of fun ideas now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, which set me back. Yeah, hopefully it set me back about a year. I had some things that were ready to go in March of last year, and everything shut down. Yeah. So I'm rebuilding, but I'm certainly looking for equity financing. I'm looking for ways to go back to some of the people that have distributed my things in the past and see if I present them with a cast and I get a casting director, if I could get some money from that. So my next steps are creating this slate of features and then rolling them out over a period of a couple of years. So definitely keep an eye on Luminactus. That's my company. We're trying to raise that money. We have some amazing ideas. And I really want to get back to directing some films.
Great guy. And if you'd like to help me support this channel, you can join memberships here. Just hit the join button right below the video. You can do so for as little as 99 cents a month, or if Patreon is more your jam, then you can do that at www.patreon.com/jhorton. But whatever you do, keep making movies. Like the little glasses thing? That's cool, right?